Welcome to ESD School, brought to you by Attract. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single episode. Enjoy the video.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, today I want to speak to you about how to make ESD easy. Will be a mix of tips and tricks that is important when you want to learn and to improve for ESD. First, in introduction, why we have still a debate for en bloc resection of all large superficial GI tract neoplasia. You know all this answer. It's because it's technically challenging. It's known to be more risky. There is a debate about the cost effectiveness and it's time consuming. And you know, in fact, there is about all these reasons no carcinological reason, and nobody can tell you that for the patient, for a carcinological point of view, it is better to do a piecemeal MR than an en bloc resection. So the solution is to solve the technical issue, because all these issues are techniques, and the technical issue, to solve it, to make ESD more easy, it will be about the material, about the tip control, and about the exposition of the submucosal. This is all the material you need to have, at least in your unit, when you want to be efficient in ESD. All these pedals, last generation electrosurgical unit, a lot of things of coagulation forceps, a lot of different knives, transparent hood, clip and over the scope clip, rubber band or traction device, CO2 insufflation, dedicated scope, pediatric colonoscope with large operating channel or gastroscope with a huge bonding capability, washing pump, two washing pump, one for the scope and one for the knife. It's very important to think about all of this and not begin ESD without having all these possibilities. Also about the material, it is necessary to be curious. You need to discuss with your friends that are doing or learning ESD. Not only having one mentor, you know, the big mistake is to do only with the same things that your mentor told you and not being aware of good ideas that could come from everybody, from your student, from another expert, from your nurse. Test. Always try innovation, because there is some innovation that fits your technique and that doesn't fit your technique. So it's the same. Don't trust just one person, and test all the innovation to have your own opinion about the potential that could help in your practice. Innovate also. Try to innovate, have idea. That's what we do when we develop the traction with the rubber band. And trust your idea. Don't think that if it is not done by other experts, that is not a good idea. Sometimes it could be a revolution. And share your idea with your colleague to improve and to be more proficient and to have their feedback about your device. And try to validate when you have this kind of innovation, because of course endoscopy is hard, but we need science to confirm that your innovation improve the field of this wonderful technique. Probably the most important thing in performing good and efficient ESD is the scope control. Your scope needs to be your hand, because when you do ESD, it's like a surgeon that works with only one hand. So you need to have a perfect handling of the scope and to have the ability to work in a short and straight scope position, to have the best answer of the scope to all of your movements. And this good answer to your scope begin with how you handle the scope. How you handle the scope in your left hand, with the ability to have your left thumb that could reach the two wheels, the big wheel but the small wheel, and the ability of rotating your scope on itself with torquing on your right hand or moving your shoulders on your body. It's very important, because it will be the combination of your wheel and of this movement of torquing, rotation of the scope on itself, that will allow you to go in the right plane, to have your scope perfectly in a tangential meter with a knife at 6 o'clock. That's how it works. How to handle the scope. You can also handle the scope from outside the connector. I prefer inside the connector, but I think there is no difference. But here you see with my left hand, the ability I have with my left thumb and my third left finger to play with the two wheel to move my scope in every position. My right hand could be, because she is free, because of this, because the ability to use my two wheel with the left hand on the knife to work with accuracy, or on the scope to torque. you have a supplementary difficulty that adds when you do colonic ESD, that to have a perfect cup maneuverability, you need to be able to do perfect shortening colonoscopy with good installation of your room, with using water-head colonoscopy, for example, and you have this wonderful video on GIE, video GIE that explain how to install the scope, how to install the room, how to handle the scope, and how to do shortening colonoscopy with the small movement right turn shortening colonoscopy. I invite you to all see this video to have the most powerful technique of colonoscopy and be able to have each time the secum between 60 and 80 centimeters from the anal verge. That will make you able to be confident and to have good scope maneuverability to do colonic ESD. The fact to have the short and straight position of the scope explains the different difficulty of different locations. That's why antrum is the most easy. Of course, you have a big muscularis propria, a big submucosal plate, but also you have a scope that is straight and easy to maintain and easy to answer to your movement. Like rectum, fundus is more difficult. Esophagus finally is not so difficult because it's straight, it's short, but the lumen is narrow and you have a lot of, you scare when you do esophagus ESD because you know that the perforation can be very dangerous. And that's why colon has always been seen to be one of the most difficult parts because you have the thinness of the muscularis propria, you have the poor scope maneuverability, the thinness of the submucosal space. So this ability to have a perfect short and perfect scope control with the scope in a short and straight position is very important.
In case of poor scope maneuverability, you have different tips and tricks that could help you, and that could help you a lot, in particular in right colon ESD. First is turning the patient, because the scope maneuverability is not the same according to the position of your patient, and in our experience, in more than 80% of cases, you have a better scope control when you move the patient from the left lateral position to supine position or the right lateral position. Also, you can use tunneling technique or pocketing technique. It's the same. It may help you and having a stabilization of the scope under the mucosal flap, and also not forget to use retroflexion that stabilize your scope, but that's sometimes challenging in the right colon. Probably my most important part is here to have a perfect scope control, to have a perfect response, and to be safe and efficient with ESD. You need to work at 6 o'clock and to work tangentially. And to this, you need not to forget the C shape. You know, the GI tract has a C shape with a C that is more close in the esophagus than in the colorectum. So if you want that your knife is working like this always at 6 o'clock, you need to understand how to combine the movement to be able to have this scope that move in the right way. If you do only the right and left wheel, that's what happens. Your scope is moving like this in direction of the muscle, and you have a risk of perforation on the lateral part of your lesion. If you do only torquing or rotation of your scope, your operating channel will be turning like this when you turn your scope. Then you need to use up and down wheels, and also you're moving in direction of the muscle, and that will be dangerous. Finally, the ideal is to combine the both. What you want that your operating channel and your knife go like this, staying tangential. So you need to move your scope rotation on itself here in the right. So with a counterclockwise rotation, your scope will turn like this, and then doing some right and up. And it's combining these three movements that make your scope doing like this. That is the movement that you want to have to stay efficient and safe during ESD. Then, when you master the scope control, you've done the most important part. Then you want to increase your speed, increase your accuracy, and the understanding is to have perfect exposure of the submucosal space. And to have this perfect exposure of submucosal space, it will begin from injection, then a good and even a perfect incision with trimming, then opening your plane with traction and gravity, being able to work tangentially in the plane, and choose the good cutting line. And we will have some advice to all of these steps that are mandatory to be safe and efficient for ESD. The first step for a good exposition of the submucosa is doing a good injection in a good place. In fact, you will have a full chapter on this by Mathieu, but it is very important to understand that what you want to be surelevated when you do ESD is not the lesion like you do in EMR, it's your cutting line. You want having a cutting line perfectly surelevated, and that's what's happened when you see here. At this point, you inject very far from the lesion, very, very far, at least 5 millimeter to 1 centimeter outside the dot, to have here a big surelevation that can go bigger than 1 centimeter of surelevation, that make you a full safety cushion, liquid cushion that help you to push on your knife without any doubt, without being scared about being too deep. That's the opposite here, where the ingestion was too close from the lesion. The lesion is surelevated, but here you don't have any plane. It will be very difficult to do a mucosal incision enough deep to go below the mucosal flap. So that's a tip that I learned 5 years ago by Mathieu, that is very, very important to have a perfect mucosal incision and efficient. For the perfect incision, of course, you have to do a perfect submucosal injection, but then you have to make this incision and then trimming. It's, for me, the most difficult part of the procedure, because it is a blinding phase. And it's also a critical step, because it will decide after the incision if you will be R0 or not, and it is a critical step to be quick, because if you do immediately a good incision in the good plane, you will go very, very fast. When you see here, the red line is the muscularis mucosae. If you are too superficial, you will have bleeding, you will not be in the plane, not able to go under the lesion to be efficient. You need to go immediately in the good plane. Here a small video that shows the injection very far from the lesion. You see the lesion when retroflexion in the rectum, where with a Pentax Splash M knife, we put far from the lesion, and we will push on retroflexion on the mucosa to be immediately in the good plane with this knife. And you see immediately, it's real time, that the plane open very well, because the knife cut in the same time the mucosa and the first fiber of the submucosa. Here I stop the video just to show you. You see that we were deep, and here close more superficial, and we see this whitish part here that is muscularis mucosae, that is not well cut. So we'll need to improve the cutting at this part, because the difficulty is when we do this lateral movement to slide on the mucosa, we need also to push and to pull the scope to maintain the good pressure on the knife on the plane, to have always the knife in the good plane and to cut the good fiber. And here you see we open the plane, and in less than 1 minute we will be in the plane below the flap and being able to be quite safe and efficient. For this incision, also you need to understand how work your knife, and generally you have two types of knife. You have needle tip knife that has the most used knife, like dual knife, flush knife, hybrid knife, splash M knife, etc. That will work with pushing, and in particular for the incision, it's very important to work with pushing, because when you will put your knife in the mucosa, it will serve as an anchor, and you will push then your scope with small up, and if you are in a good plane, your knife will go more in the direction of the lumen. Because if you try with a pushing knife, with a needle tip knife, to do the incision like this, your needle will need to make some down and pull the knife, so to have a pressure on the mucosa, you need to increase the down wheel, and you will have your knives that go in direction to the muscle. And very dangerous, because you go in direction of the muscle, and also because when you pull the knife, you don't see where you are going. And when you push the knife on the incision, you go in direction of the lumen, and you see what you are doing. So it's more safe and more efficient. To work with pulling, you need to use this kind of knife, like IT knife, or small different knife, but the most classical knife that is used in this situation to work with pulling is the IT knife. When I've done a perfect incision, good trimming, I can then be able to increase my plane to be more efficient. You have two tips that are very useful. Of course, the gravity and the traction. The gravity is the first traction method. It is very important to use it, in particular in the rectum. It is mandatory in the rectum. It increases your dissection plane. like you see here. It avoids leaky stagnation. That is very important when you will encounter bleeding, because if you encounter bleeding and you have no stagnation of the bleeding in your operating field, it will be more easy and more quick to treat it, and you will not have this hematoma that go under your plane. And also it avoids leakage in case of perforation, and we know all that perforation is not so dangerous except when you have some stool that are going into the peritoneal cavity. So using the gravity by turning the patient is mandatory in the rectum. Unfortunately, the team of Professor Jacopin in Rome shows that in the colon, turning the patient was unsuccessful in 30% of cases because the colon is turning on itself in this mobile part. That's why in our habits we prefer having a perfect scope maneuverability with the scope in a short position and a non-helpful gravity than having a perfect helpful gravity and a bad scope maneuverability. That's notably true in the right colon, where we have seen that generally in supine position or in right lateral position, we have a better scope maneuverability. And despite in several situations we don't have the help of the gravity, we prefer not having the help of the gravity, but having a perfect scope maneuverability. After the traction, after the incision, after the gravity, use the traction. Use the traction, because there is a debate, I use the traction only when it is difficult. Our group in France, we use traction every time, because I always say the same. Have you ever seen a surgeon, even the best surgeon in the world, working with only one hand or with only one forceps in laparoscopy? Not. He's always trying to have triangulation. So the perfect traction, it should be independent from the scope, adaptive, removable, cheap, go to the working channel. The first step was pocketing and tunneling method developed by the Japanese. Then we developed the rubber band traction with clips that make a lot of facility and a lot of improvement. And now we move to the attract device, this adaptable traction device with 4 points that work together as a traction, with a traction that is optimized in the center part of the lesion. And then when you begin to lose the traction, that happens during the procedure, particular for big lesion, you have this possibility to tighten the dispositif, as you will see in this draw here, and you will increase the traction for the end of the procedure. Don't forget that ESD, it's a matter of tangentiality. You are safe, you are efficient, you are quick when you work tangential. At 6 o'clock, it's the best for all the scopes that have a 6 o'clock working channel. Sometimes you have difficulty to be at 6 o'clock, so you can turn yourself and work at 12 o'clock, but it will be a little bit more dangerous, because as you see here, when you work at 12 o'clock with a knife that goes at 6 o'clock, you need to go with more up in direction of the muscle, so you need to be more accurate and more slow to avoid muscle damage. The ideal is never being perpendicular. That is very difficult, very challenging technically, and very, very, very risky. Of course, all these draws are right with scope when the working channel is between 5 and 7 o'clock, and you know that Olympus gastroscope have an operating channel that is more at 8 o'clock, so the position of the scope to do ESD is quite not the same. To increase the tangentiality, don't forget 2 very important tips. Use the pocket creation method when you are in difficulty, like here, very perpendicular to the lesion. If you begin the pocket far from the lesion, the tension that is created by your scope will make the lesion more tangential and help you being less dangerous. The other solution is to work with retroflexion, because retroflexion increases stability, decrease bowel movement, and as you see here, for this kind of situation where we were completely perpendicular in direct visualization, we move to retroflexion, and now we become tangential. Just few tips and tricks on particular situation. For lesion on the fold, do not begin perpendicular to the fold and close to the lesion. It will be very challenging to go under the lesion, very challenging to go tangentially, and you will have a lot of risk being perforation. The ideal for me is being able to put the scope on the lateral part and to follow the fold going right and left in each side of the fold, because it will be at the beginning when you will have the less thickness of the submucosal. It will be on the fold, but on the right and on the left you will have a good submucosal plane. The other solution is begin very far from the lesion, more than 1 centimeter, to do like we just show on the dia before, in case of perpendicular situation, making a pocket creation method until being on the fold, and the tension that will come from the scope will make you more straight and more in a good situation for the plane. If you have a small video, you have this non-granular LST on the valvular fold, you see we will be very, very perpendicular if we begin like this. So we will make the injection, and in fact we'll have done a circumferential incision, and we'll put our traction device on the tip on the fold. You see the first rubber band, it is on the tip of the fold. We'll then grasp the rubber with a second clip, put it in front of us, and then we will try, we have moved our position to follow the fold. Here you see a good opening of the plane. We are on the tip of the fold, and we have just to go on the left and the right part where we have a lot of submucosal plane, and we will be able to be efficient, safe and quick in this challenging situation on the fold of the valvula, and remove in one pieces with free margin without any trouble in 30 minutes this challenging lesion. Here is the end of the procedure. Use inflation and deflation as the tool to increase tangentiality. When you have a lesion on the fold, if you increase too much, you increase, because you know on the fold is where is the muscle, that is a fixed point, and the column between the two folds is more mobile and more sensitive to the inflation. So you will inflate with fixed point on the fold, and you will increase the perpendicularity of the fold. If you decrease like this, you see the draw, you will become less perpendicular with a low level of inflation. Other tips is doing for this kind of situation underwater ESD, that is much and more useful. You can combine underwater ESD and traction that allow you to push the fold and to make a floatability of the lesion to help you being in a good situation. So underwater ESD is also a solution to help you for the exposition of the submucosa and to be more safe challenging situation, in particular in case of situation where you are perpendicular, because it erases the fold and improves the field of view in case of non-nap of the gravity. And don't forget to combine it with pocket. It's what is called the saline immersion pocket technique, or with traction, or all together, traction, pocketing and immersion. Also, don't forget to find the good cutting line deep in the submucosa, because when you are deep in the submucosa, you increase your vertical margin and you decrease the risk of bleeding, because you will just encounter the big trunk of the vessel, and you will just have to make a precoagulation of this big trunk instead of, if you being in the upper third of the submucosa, being in front of all this ramification of the vessel and have a lot of small oozing bleeding that will impair your field of view and make your procedure more difficult, more challenging, and more risky. Finally, and I think it's very important, evaluate your safe. It's a model of our datasheet that is in the unit. All our cases are in big datasheet, and we try to analyze our result at least every 6 months and see where we are in terms of end block, in terms of perforation, in terms of delayed bleeding, in terms of R0 resection, etc., in terms of speed of the resection, to be able to see if we are improving, if we have trouble, to evaluate our trainee, if you can change our strategy. It's very important. I think you never have to stop to train for ESD. You will improve, and after now more than 1,500 ESD in the unit, we continue to improve ourselves, and we continue to have idea to improve all the global result of our unit. So to conclude, I hope this lecture helps you for your daily practice. Don't hesitate to give us your feedback. ESD is now much easier thanks to training, thanks to all these tips and tricks that we learn from Japanese, and then we learn by our experience and by sharing all our idea and all our difficulty. But it will never, I think, become an easy procedure. You need to not forget to think about all the key points we discussed today, but even more important, you need to understand all the key points, because if you try just to do, I have heard from the French guy that sometimes you use pocket, sometimes you use traction, sometimes you use tunneling, it will not work. The ideal is to understand in every situation, in every difficulty, what could be a solution. Also, the strategies are not competitive but complementary. I'm a little bit fed up with all the guys that say, no, I don't like traction, I prefer pocketing, I prefer tunneling. For me, there is situation where one is better, and generally when you combine what I told you, combining pocketing with traction, with underwater, you have so good result. And don't forget to use all the strategy together. And of course, for us, we push on it, but we really think when we see the result in front, just traction in the revolution, and that it was a first revolution with the easy to use clip and rubber band, and now with the attract is a second resolution that will help to gain safety and to gain democratization of this technique. Never forget that mastering the technical aspect will send the scientific indication. We have this first dia. Remember about the limit to widespread ESD, only technical limits. So more you are able to do ESD efficient and quick, more you will do in block resection. There is no way, if you're able to remove a 5 centimeter lesion in 20 minutes as we do today, without any perforation, without any muscle damage in an outpatient situation, why will you do still piecemeal resection that need to you a 6 month and 18 month endoscopy with a risk of losing pathological intervention and a risk of recurrence? Evaluate your result every year. You need to know what is your result, because the truth about the benefit of ESD for an expert team will not perhaps be your own truth. You have to know if the literature about expert center is applicable to your result, to choose the good strategy for your patient. And never stop sharing and training. Don't be in competition between experts, but try to discuss all together to improve this wonderful technique for the benefit of the patient. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with your colleagues. Until next time, this is ESD School by Attract.